Hello, my name is Chloe, welcome to my channel. Today I'm bringing to you my October wrap-up. So I have a lot of notes down here. I'm hoping I can get through this quite quickly because I did read 17 books in October. To do my little check of my physical TBR, I started the month with 454 books on my TBR. I read 16, I hauled 9, and I unhauled without reading 12. So my physical TBR has gone down to 435 books. As I said, I read 17 books this month, which was a total of 5,954 pages. I read 10 books physically and 7 books via audio, giving me an average pages per day of 192, and the average length of the books I was reading was 350 pages. To run you through the ratings, I had 4 2-star reads, 1 2.5 star, 4 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 4 4 stars, and 2 5 stars, which meant my average rating this month was a 3.1 star. Okay, running through the books that I gave 2 stars, I work from lowest to highest rated. The first one is The Jigsaw Man by Nadine Matheson. This is the book that's made me realise I really don't do detective thrillers. I can't even tell you much about this book. I listened to it via audio and I think that was problem number 1. I really tuned out. But saying that, I was just playing House Flipper while I listened, so I had enough attention. But we're following a detective who was involved in the past on catching a serial killer known as the Jigsaw Man. In the present day, there is a copycat killer and she kind of just asked the Jigsaw Man for help. Very Silence of the Lambs Hannibal vibe, just not quite as disturbing. And I really wanted to love this one, but sadly it didn't do anything for me and it's already been unhauled. Next up we have Rouge by Mona Awad, which I gave 2 stars, and please don't come for me. This I was sent for review and I'm glad I gave it a go. I read Bunny a couple months ago, didn't really understand any of it but liked the vibes. This one was weirder vibes, if that's even possible, and I came out of the end still not knowing what had really happened. Straight away I went over to Reddit. There was already a thread of people going, huh, what just happened? And for a book to leave me quite so confused by the end is just not indicative of a good rating for me. Like, I did not have a good time with this. Saying that, I have plans for this book with somebody who I think is going to get a hell of a lot more out of it, so that is going straight in their Christmas box. But yeah, it just didn't really mean anything to me. I didn't enjoy it. Next up I have You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao, and I realise this might be a little bit controversial. This is one of the TikTok favourite books and sadly it did nothing for me. So this is about a girl, Juliet, whose boyfriend Sam has tragically died. Unfortunately though, I didn't feel bad that her boyfriend had died or feel sad for her at all, because you kind of start the book knowing that Sam's dead and you don't get to a point, I don't think, where you care enough about him as a character to really be that bothered. Juliet I found incredibly dislikable, was not a fan of her at all, and the whole magical realism part of this, obviously it was far-fetched. So Sam has died, Juliet rings his phone to hear his voicemail and she actually gets through to Sam, who is dead. So quite a lot of magical realism part of this. It made me think of Landline by Rainbow Rowell, which I also didn't enjoy. But yeah, not a fan of this one. 2 stars. Next up, I finally gave We Played With Fire by Catherine Barter a go and I gave it 2 stars. This is about our 2 little girls, Maggie and Kate, who decide to make their parents think the house is haunted by doing some sort of seance. And then it gets to a point where they're being hired out for parties providing seances, but they're kind of making half of it up. I was very lost throughout this book. I'm going to do some research into the Fox sisters because they were real people. So I kind of want to go at this from a true historical, like witchy, ghosty view. But this book, I listened to it via audio because I found it on, I think it was my library app, and I just kind of spent a week or so listening to it and not really getting any enjoyment. So 2 stars. Next up, the book I gave 2.5 stars was Stealing Phoenix by Joss Sterling. This is book 2 in the Benedict series. And yeah, I wasn't a massive fan of this. This is a fantasy series that is a completely different take on having magic and finding the person you're meant to be with. I did reread the first book, which I'll talk about in a minute, but this is book 2 in the series, and I just wasn't as invested in the relationship. The actual story felt a lot weaker. So we're following a girl who's been brought up basically as a petty thief in London using her powers, and a lot of the book was her and the brother from the family journeying around London and going to the Olympic Park a lot. You can tell when this was written, and oh, we're gonna go to a play at this theatre, and we're on the tube and we're in Piccadilly, and it felt really cheesy. So 2.5 stars. So there we go. I can then talk about Finding Sky, which on reread I gave 3 stars. This is book 1 in the series. I gave it 4 stars initially just because it was so different and unique and I really liked the story. I listened to this one on audio so that I could go into book 2 and just read it a little bit quicker. And the audiobook was so cringy that I couldn't give this a good rating. The narrator is English, and like British English, and she's doing cheesy American accents that genuinely hurt my skull. So I probably would still give the story, the uniqueness, 4 stars, but the audiobook was just so bad that it had to come down to a 3. Next up, we have Love Lessons by Jacqueline Wilson, which is again a 3 star. And I'm kind of debating keeping this or not. I think I have to. So we're following 2 sisters, Prue and Grace. They've been home educated their whole life, but then their dad suffers a heart attack. He ends up in hospital and they have to go to a public school. Prue is really struggling. She's 15, she doesn't quite know how to fit in, but the one person who's nice to her is her art teacher, Rax. And I think I need to keep this book for the nostalgia, because this is the book that, I won't say his name again just in case for some reason he does ever find my YouTube. This is the reason that I decided it was okay to be in love with one of my teachers, like literally in love with a teacher. And I decided it was fine because it happened in this book. The story is actually pretty good. There's a lot about dealing with abuse at home. But one thing that I cannot stand about this book going back as an adult is there are no repercussions. The conclusion is not nice. I don't like how it ends up. And again, it's why I was convinced it was okay to be in love with a teacher. So I think I need to keep this for nostalgia, but I wouldn't actually recommend giving this to a teenager. There are too many hormones to add this into your life. Next up, I have The Burning by Laura Bates, which I kind of gave a go on a whim. I'm glad I did, but I would not be shouting from the rooftops about this book. So this says new school, new town, new surname, and then social media profiles erased. We're following our main character Anna, and she's moved from England to Scotland to avoid something that happened on social media and start a new life. She moves into a house where she believes there are witches' marks, and when she's given a project at school to look into someone historical from the local area, she decides to find out about who would have lived in her house before, and a woman who was accused of being a witch. The thing that happened on social media is so obvious. Like, I swear there must be 50 YA books telling you not to do what happens in this book. So it kind of makes it a little bit less impactful because you're kind of like, ah, stupid, you shouldn't have done that. And I didn't really care for the character too much because I think we've just been told so many times what you should and shouldn't do as a teenager online. I didn't dislike this book by any means. I liked the dropping in of the historical elements and witch trials and things like that, but it just isn't sticking with me as much as anything higher than a 3-star rating would. And my final 3-star read is unfortunately The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. This is an adult romance following Lena, who is a wedding planner who ends up working on a project with Max, the best man from her failed wedding, who also happens to be the groom's brother. They haven't seen each other in 3 years and they are working together on a work project for Lena to become the new wedding planner of a highly esteemed hotel group. It's very clear from the start what is going to happen in this book, and I did like the romance. I did like the smut. I think it was done really well. It was really like romantic, not in a seedy way. But the one thing I did find about this book is the timing, like the pacing seemed really off. You're following that complete romance structure of get together, there's a problem, fix it, get back together. and it just all kind of felt shifted in the wrong places in the book, and I just didn't really enjoy the pacing of it. I never thought it would be that much of an issue, but yeah, I just didn't really like how this one felt to read. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone, but I did like the romance story. I feel like it might be a nice one to pick up on audio. It's just an easy read, but it wasn't my next big favorite thing. Next up, I have two 3.5-star reads, both of which I don't have with me because they've both been given to the Christmas elf. It's just how I keep referring to myself. The first one is A Witch's Guide to Fate Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. This was a buddy read with Faith this month, and I did enjoy it. Like, clearly I gave it 3.5 stars, but it just wasn't everything to me. If you're a fan of The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling, I would definitely recommend this book. We're following a witch who feels like a little bit of a failure. Her magic isn't that great, and when she's trying to summon flower, I think, she accidentally summons a demon into her home, and he is not allowed to leave until she makes a bargain for her life, pretty much. It's funny in times, the romance is good, the smut is good, but it was just missing something, and I don't know what it was missing, but I felt exactly the same way about this book as I did about The Ex-Hex. So I feel like if you love that, you'll love this. I then buddy read How to Kill Men and Get Away with It by Katie Brent. Me and Victoria read this book, and after talking to her, I did knock my rating down a little bit, so 3.5 stars. This was a very interesting book. If you like Sweet Pea, How to Kill Your Family, or Luckiest Girl Alive, we're following a woman who feels like she has the power to decide if men are worth being alive. It all starts when she's followed home from a night out and a guy tries to attack her with a glass bottle, but actually ends up falling on the broken glass and killing himself. This starts a whole train of events where she finds joy in getting rid of questionable men. I did like this book, and I did originally give it 4 stars, but Victoria did dial me back a little bit. It's not really quite evident what this book wants to be. Is it following a serial killer woman doing what she wants to do, or is it a take at societal issues? It was kind of in the middle, and I wanted it to be one or the other so that I could form a strong opinion, but the kind of crossover was a little bit weak for me. Kind of the same as How to Kill Your Family, actually, by Bella Mackie. I would recommend this one. It was a nice, fun time. I say nice, it wasn't nice, it was very graphic, but it was an enjoyable time. I did love reading it. I always love buddy reading with Victoria, but again, just not my next favourite thing. Next up, we are on to the 4-star reads, and the first one is the Chloe's Crime Scene Corner read for the month, which is The Last House on Needler Street by Catriona Ward. I gave this 4 stars, and it's a very begrudging 4 stars, so I have an issue with this author's writing. I never seem to understand what she's on about. This is a very confusing book. You, I think, should go into it blind, not knowing anything, because then it just makes it a little bit more enjoyable to find out all the twists and turns of what's happening. But overall, we're following Ted, who is a little bit different. He's a little bit different, and it's really hard to figure out what to make of him at the start. There's a historic news story of a young girl who was taken and never found, and her older sister is starting on a mission to find out what happened. I think that's all you really need to know. It's very confusing, and it's meant to be. And I really loved what that was actually happening. That was really interesting to me, and I'm glad it went that way. But this author's writing always just boggles my brain. So I might drop this down to a 3.5, I'm not sure. I am unhauling it. I'm never going to read it again because it just hurt my brain to think about, but the actual story was quite interesting. So I would recommend, but make sure you've got time to think. Next up, we have I Tell You I'd Love You, But Then I'd Have to Kill You by Ali Carter. This is book 1 of the Gallagher Girls series, and it's about a school for teenage girls learning to be spies. I reread this because I absolutely loved it as a kid, and I wanted to pick it up again and see if it stood the test of time. It definitely does. I loved the romance. I loved the little like friendships between the girls, and also just the spy part is pretty damn cool. I won't be rereading the entire series, and I'm actually just going to unhaul this. I read it again for a fun time. I got my fun time, but if you've got a teenage girl in your life who wants to pretend to be a spy, then this is fantastic. Next up, a bit of a weird one. A very weird one. I read Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. This was nothing like I expected. All I knew was it was messed up. And this is so messed up, I had to just sit and think about it for a minute after and just check that I was still doing okay. We're following Sibby, who lives in the walls of a haunted house. And like How to Kill Men, just a bit more graphically, she decides if people are worth continuing their life. If they're evil, she can smell them out and she can get rid of them. She does get rid of them in graphic detail, and she enjoys it in graphic detail. This kind of goes along with Haunting Adeline, which I'll be reading in November, but Claire told me to read this book first. I was going to talk about it in that vlog, but it was actually so depraved and disturbed at some points that I didn't feel comfortable reading it out and having my voice say that on camera for the rest of my life. So I've decided not to include it in that video in detail. I will mention it. I do not recommend this book. I gave it 4 stars, but I don't recommend it. I don't think you should read it. I don't really know what else to say. Like, it was bad, but I enjoyed it, I think. Did I enjoy it? I don't know. I don't know. Next up, I'm sorry that this is a 4-star, guys, but it's a good 4-star. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is the very, very hyped TikTok fantasy. I hate calling it that, but come on, TikTok did really blow this up. And I said that if I enjoyed the ending, I was going to pre-order book 2. Book 2 should be arriving in a couple days. We're following Violet, who enters the Rider's Quadrant to become a dragon rider, but she's got to pass all these tests first before she gets there. That's probably the most easy way to explain it. I've given this 4 stars because the first like 200 pages felt a little bit boring to me. Like, yes, she was facing death to get into the Rider's Quadrant and start her dragon riding career, but I just wasn't really that invested. I didn't really care too much and I could easily put it down. But the romance that gets brought into this book is top tier. Massive fan, massive fan. The book definitely did have Throne of Glass vibes, like of that series. So if you enjoy those books, you should definitely have read this one by now. I wouldn't recommend this to everyone. That first section was quite boring, but by the end, I knew what was going to happen. The twist was very obvious. People say it's not, but like, it is. But I did enjoy where it went, and I'm very excited to read book 2. And finally, we have 2 5-star reads, both of which I kind of gave a bit begrudgingly again, because I'm not shy on here on my opinion on BookTok. I am very jealous of the success of BookTokers, especially how quick it can happen, and I just don't really like how hyped books can get over there when they're not that great. Both of these books are very hyped TikTok books. I don't know, maybe I need to refine my opinion on BookTok and actually trust them a little bit, not just be jealous. Like, my whole hate for BookTok comes from jealousy, so I'm fully aware of that. The first book that I gave 5 stars is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This is book 1 in the Knock 'Em Out series, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. We are following Naomi, who travels to a small town called Knock 'Em Out to help out her twin sister. Her twin sister has not lived the best life. She's kind of questionable, bit of a thief, bit of a drunk, doesn't have the best reputation. She turns up and her sister steals all of her belongings, including her car, and ditches her with a niece that she didn't know she had. We meet Knox, who is the local very attractive man, and he sees Naomi, thinks that she is her sister, and tells her to get the hell out of town, but she doesn't because she's not her sister. And clearly there is some friction between Knox and Naomi, which ends up being some very nice friction to read about. I really did enjoy this one. If you're putting it off for the length, fair enough, but I did enjoy it, and I am very excited to read the rest of the series. I thought this was really good, and I was so invested in these 2 characters' lives. Loved it. And finally, a book that I definitely should have anticipated was going to go the way it did, but didn't, and was so shocked, is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I really enjoyed this book. This is a kind of domestic thriller. We're following, I want to say like Molly, no, that's Millie. We're following Millie, who has got out of prison not that long ago. She's struggling to keep herself afloat and find a good job. She ends up getting offered this job as a housemaid for the Winchester family. There are a husband, a wife, and a child, and it's very weird. Like, she's given an attic room that's a bit confined, but it will fit her needs. And Nina Winchester, the wife, just seems to be making things more difficult for her than they need to be, and she can't really understand where this hatred is coming from. The twist in this book, looking back, is so obvious, but when I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, what is happening? So if you want a really fun, quick, oh my god moment, I really recommend this book. So there we have it. Those are the 17 books that I read in October. Let me know if there are any here that you completely disagree with. I would love to talk to you about them in the comments. I'm going to wrap it up now because I've been talking for a very long time, but thank you so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.